The Willows Asylum. Zach peered apprehensively through the cracked windshield as his buddy Kyle killed the engine. They had pulled up to the remnants of the abandoned Willows Psychiatric Hospital, a decrepit ruin that had been left to rot for over 30 years. "You sure about this, man?" Zach asked hesitantly. "Place gives me the creeps, just looking at it." Kyle flashed him a mischievous grin. "That's exactly why we're here, bro. For a little adrenaline kick to start our summer off right." Zach couldn't argue with the rush of exploring such a notorious locale. The Willows had been ground zero for some of the darkest instances of malpractice and abuse in the state's history back in its operational years. Tales of barbaric treatments, illegal experimentation on patients, and even mysterious disappearances had turned the place into a local bogeyman of urban legends. At least, that's what Kyle had assured Zach when talking him into this little late-night escapade. Zach still felt uneasy about potentially getting caught trespassing by police or nosy security. But after years of Kyle's gearhead big talk, he was determined to finally show his bravado. "Okay, let's get this over with," Zach muttered, drawing the hood of his sweatshirt up against the brisk night air. As they crept around the crumbling perimeter fences and rusted metal gates, the shadowy buildings seemed to loom larger and more ominous with every step closer. Ivy and creeping vines had worked their way up through cracks and crevices over decades of neglect, twisting and knotting in a way that almost seemed intentionally malevolent. "Jesus, this place is like something out of a damn horror movie," Kyle murmured, shooting a nervous look back over his shoulder as they reached the former visitor's entrance. Most of the outer windows were boarded up, those that weren't shattered into opaque cataracts of cobwebs and grime. Kyle flexed his shoulders in feigned nonchalance and pushed through the rusted double doors with a sharp creak of abused hinges. Inside, they found themselves in a cavernous rotunda courtyard open to the elements and choked with vegetation run utterly amok. Caved-in sections of the ceiling latticed with ivy created a dizzying array of shadows that seemed to shift and undulate. "Not gonna lie, this feels straight out of an Erebus level from Doom," Kyle quipped, clearly a bit shook beneath his bravado as he raised his flashlight beam to scan the gnarled hallways branching off from the atrium. They both froze as something shifted in the darkness behind a crumbling archway. At first Zach thought it was merely the night breeze winding through the treacherous labyrinth they had disturbed. But then the shadows seemed to take on substance, slowly peeling away from the rubble and amassing into a towering, vaguely humanoid construct. "I've been waiting." A breathy, lumbering voice exhaled, withered vocal cords straining beneath the weight of endless centuries. Felt the psychic tendrils roiling through the specter over the eons, drawing in generations of restless witnesses, just like you. Bile rose in Zach's throat as the towering wraith radiated outwards in all directions, as if composed of woven darkness and verdigreased bone. What should have been eyes were instead pits of condensed night terror pulling in all light and matter. As it turned its withered skull towards them, Zach felt the unholy strain of its mere existence raking against the boundaries of his mind. Kyle started babbling, yelling frantic threats, but his words trailed off into gurgling wheezes as the specter lurched forward with a sudden burst of blurring speed. In an instant it was on them, shedding cloaks of stained linens and winding cerements in its wake like strips of molting flesh sloughing away to birth some unspeakable new being. Zach struggled violently as the thing's gnashing capillary maws encircled him in slick, pulsating rings. A deluge of lucid nightmares implanted themselves behind his eyes in an instantaneous download of pure unadulterated trauma. Layer after layer of harrowed psyches and eternities of anguish blazed into his shattering synapses, the waking screams of fathers and mothers driven to demented ecstasies of self-immolation after witnessing the butchery of their offspring, the raptures of ecstasy and dissolution that awaited the practitioner savant once they grasped the schematics of consciousness hardwired into the morphic fractal causeways, the sheets of abandoned souls adrift in a rudderless tumult of pure potential. Waste, purpose draining in rivulets down along the dripping oubliettes of incomprehensible transits. Kyle's lamentations had deteriorated into raw-throated infanticide howls of the sort predating human linguistics and brain architecture altogether. Only the imprints of these cries remained, frozen in the synaptic fiber trails of Zach's lacerated hemispheres sloughing into particulate ashen waste. He could no longer delineate where the nightmares of the collective asylum residue ended and his own psyche began unspooling in tattered ribbons. The telepathic wound festers spread in liquid iridescent chains of immortal gangrene slithering up the fallopian footfalls of all conceived futurity, forever reverberating back and forth across the labyrinth in eternal concussive discretions. Just before Zach's entire nervous matrix flushed itself down into the irreversible plains of programmed obsolescence, one final fragment of human agency fired off a muted distress flare of defiance from the murky shoals of awareness. Somewhere in a long-seared mnemonic trauma loop, a young nurse fleeing from what she's just witnessed, performed upon entire family units, can feel the imminent negative radiation creeping up her slender bones. She sobs in useless uncomprehending silence as she realizes the undying mercies in abeyance tonight are already boldly belching their putrid revenge fumes with wild post-human joy from where her contaminated feet have carried her, to the hallway that runs adjacent to the recreations chambers.